we've had 2 practices. We've had a couple OTAs beforehand. With some of the rules, they're allowing you to have a little bit more time to meet with the guys and walk through. But I think it's also smart that we don't overdo it. So even though they added 2 more hours, it wasn't something that we felt like, okay, we've got 10 hours now and we can have 4 hours of football, that we felt like we needed to do, because we got a lot of practices in last year before, for 9 games or 10 games, whatever it ended up being. So I think we were pretty smart with how we did things going into spring football. Went back to back, went Friday, Saturday, because the NCAA would not allow us any extra days in through your 34 to get your 15 practices in, even though I wanted to give them a good break there for Easter. So we've kind of, in some ways, not crammed, but got our 15 days of practices going to be inside that 34-day window. But in a couple instances, like last week, we had to go Friday, Saturday. So we're excited to be able to get outside a little bit with the good weather and put on some pads starting Tuesday.
We'll go with questions.
Coach, are you a theme guy? Do you have like a spring practice theme or a goal, or do you not usually get into those kind of things?
We haven't, me and the goals idea. I mean, right now it's about getting better, but I think in general, right now, just our idea of how do we kind of go to the next level. We've kind of maybe heard a little bit, high tides rise all ships, and we're not trying to do that just as a team, and this is what the expectations are, and this is what the goals are. But really, with the leadership and the older guys, whether you call them super seniors or guys like Dez or Majda that have played a lot of football, that have incredible expectations for how they do things, not just play, but how they do things to prepare to play. Trying to use those expectations to put pressure on a lot of other people around them, and you do it obviously in a positive way, but in the peer pressure way. So the idea is not just playing of raising your level, but in the way you do the little things, whether that's how you take care of your body, to how you prepare, how you study. Not just waiting for a season to say, okay, hey, I'm a guy playing behind Majay or Desmond Ritter. I got some time. No, it's we're gonna hold you to a very similar expectation as them. So I don't know that there's a true theme behind that, but the idea of those high tides, puts pressure not just on the younger people in your program. I also think it puts pressure on your coaches as well.
Luke, is there an excitement about the program that is carried over from last year, obviously having a great season and going to a big bowl, performing well at the bowl game, and now carrying over and having a lot of guys come back? I got to think there's an excitement level to the program that maybe feels a little bit different this spring.
Well, we've had excitement. I think the way we've played the last 3 years. I mean, in a lot of times because of the way you've ended. So there's been some excitement within our program. I don't know that our guys. I'm sure they do social media and things like that, but probably still with the way we're living or trying or having to live here with hopefully the ending of COVID and the pandemic. I'm not sure that maybe they get to truly feel. I think. I feel it. I see it a little bit just in the general sense of being out and about. That I think that there's there is some of that buzz, I think, around our community and our city, which is really exciting. I want them to feel that a little bit more. If we were having an ability to maybe even have a spring game or some things like that, I think they would be able to feel it a little bit more. But the same kind of thing. Are they feeling it, a buzz on campus when campus is not at normal? I don't know, but I know there is some of that definite feeling within our program. So when I start to feel it, I'll got to find a way to try to use that as a motivator, and make sure we're aware of the other things that it could bring along with it.
Have you watched the game yet, the Peach Bowl?
You had to ask, huh? Yeah. Do you want me to go? I mean, yeah, I watched it, unfortunately.
Yeah, I was just curious.
Yeah.
Your
No, we played hard. I mean, I am really excited about really watching the way that we played, the way we competed, from the first snap. And it's hard. It's anytime I think you lose a game, and the way you did it, as close as you did, you keep kind of revisiting those 3, 4, 5, 6 plays and a few of those calls that, maybe you could have done differently. But it's not going to take away from the fact that, really impressed with how guys handled the situation, how they played, moving guys around in some, some last minute kind of changes and guys having to play other positions. To me, kind of makes you say, okay, this is the route we want to go. This is the way we want to be able to do it, is have guys that, when things do happen, they can kind of step into those positions and perform.
To follow up on that, and I guess kind of what Joe was asking too, is this is there a level of just trying to keep the foot on the gas and keep moving this program, like you said, to that next level, but maybe using last year as an example as this is the standard and you guys have that same potential, maybe even more this year?
Yeah, there's no doubt. I mean, I think that's where, when you got a mature, smart group, I think that they see it, they feel it, they understand it. I think in the winter we tried to do something. I know we still have some parameters, but we try to do some things in the winter to make sure that where all those things are happening and what the somewhat of a buzz is, that our young guys also understand it, how we got to where we are. And so you got to find that balance to saying, okay, well, how do we use this as a motivation? How do we enjoy and have some of the positive energy to make us better, but also to not forget about some of these young guys that don't understand, what Desmond Ritter and Curtis Brooks and Joel DeBlanco and Kobe Bryant had to go through, to get where they are. So all very positive and in a good way, but I think that, finding different ways to be able to use these things. Like I said, if it was a normal year right now, I think our guys would be feeling a little bit more even around campus. But I do think they understand with the maturity that they have.
Luke, the NCAA and the AFCA are looking at possibly penalizing teams if they fake injuries, in the middle of a game to slow a team down. Have you ever dealt with that from an opponent, and what do you think about the idea of a potential, post-game penalty?
I didn't hear anything about a post-game penalty. I heard
they might kind of like with targeting after the fact, someone can submit it, and it could be a fine or a suspension. They haven't really figured that out. But the idea would be after the fact, you might be able to penalize a coach or something like that.
I think they're searching for ghosts, to be honest with you, because with student athlete welfare and health and safety, it's going to be really hard to ever prove something. Now I think that there's the ability to, hey, if this is something that's taught or coached, then I think then we've got issues. And I think that, I don't know how they'll be able to go about those things. But I think that even by talking about it, what it's going to do is to make sure that guys are addressing it within their program. Because, whether they can or can't penalize, they were talking about having different rules for a defense as opposed to an offense. If a guy goes down, then he can't come back in that series. But, that doesn't, hold true for off. I said, I don't think there's any way you can have two separate rules based on guys coming out of a game. But I think that sometimes, more than anything, is just the awareness for guys to understand that I know this. We've never coached it, but I'm not saying it hasn't happened. And sometimes guys just feel the pressure, and all of a sudden maybe they do go down. And it's like, no, that's not what we want you to do, but it's not something that's taught too. So more than anything, I don't know that they'll be able to do anything and change anything, but I think the heightened awareness to making sure we're all kind of at least coaching and teaching, ethics behind what we're doing, I think is where we'll end up having to go with it.
Have you ever had an opponent do that to your team, and how do you kind of just react to it as a coach?
Maybe they have or haven't. You know what? The hard part is in the heat of the moment you get upset, and you might holler or say something, but in reality, you don't know what's going on. You don't know, A, if a kid is really hurt. You don't know, B, if he took it in his own hands. And you can't, you're a defensive guy. So I just think that, we all kind of get a little bit, selfish, and what's best for us and what's happened to us this past year changes my opinion of how we should go about in changing rules. When in reality, I think, the cooler heads, the people up top, can kind of take the opinions and understand, have a little bit more of an objective look at what we need to do, maybe to just educate not just coaches, but teams and players to how we should do things. I don't know that there's going to be much of a change. I don't know that we've never lost a game because of it. I can promise you that, and we've never won a game because of it. Has it ever happened to us or against us or for us? I'm sure at some point in time.
Hi, Coach.
Are we allowing him to talk?
Yeah, well,
All right, one question.
In like actuality, what does it look like through 15 spring practices replacing your right and your left tackle? And we saw how important those positions were this year.
Well, I think there'll be some people moving around a little bit. It's also even a little bit more difficult, I think, now. Just with what we've got coming back defensively, especially up front, whether it's Maje and Malik Van and a lot of guys that can put a lot of pressure on those guys. It's not easy to play or learn or get a good feel for a new position when you have to go against those guys all the time. But I think it's going to be a process. I think more than anything is the ability for guys to gain some confidence, to understand, to learn a little bit more. Dylan O'Quinn moving out there has done a great job, but it's still different. There's a lot more space out there. You're going against different guys at a lot of times. So there is a process, a learning curve to it, and I don't think either one, the player or the coaches, can not understand that it takes some time to develop what we've got, and I think what we've got is going to be really good. It's just going to be a little bit of a process, whether it's through 15 spring practices or through 20 practices in fall camp. There's going to be a learning curve, and it's going to go through a process of some ups and some downs.
You and Mike Tressel are back together. How has it been being in a war room with him and knocking ideas around and getting him reacclimated to Cincinnati football?
Well, we've been in a room together. I don't know if I'd call it a war room yet. Until you actually have a game on the line, then you can kind of call it a war room, because then the emotions become a little bit stronger. But the familiarity, personally, really helps. Now he has to, and has had to build some relationships, some guys in our room, defensive room, that he didn't know. But I think the relationship, the familiarity from that point of things, for me, has allowed me to, kind of stay out of the way and let him do and build some things within that defensive room with those guys, because they're really, really good, really sharp and smart and got good ideas. So, I think through that, as well as getting his input on a lot of things that we have done and finding ways to enhance and make what we've done through adjustments and whatever a little bit better.
You talked about having to build relationships. Has that been, like, for new guys, whether it's new coaches that come in or new freshmen that come in, has that been harder, being that so many things are on Zoom right now?
I would say yes. Yes. Is it hard to build relationships on Zoom? There's no doubt. You can say we've done it in recruiting because that's the only way you've really been able to do it for the last year. And I would say we've done a good job at building relationships. Are they real relationships? Do you really understand? Do you really know them? Do you have a good feel for them? I don't. Not being able to actually sit down with them, not being able to actually, maybe spend some time with their parents and things like that. Is it a different relationship? Yeah. Can you get to know some people in different ways? Sure. But even like teaching, I really don't know that you get the full effect and the feel for teaching and your guys' understanding when you can't be a little bit more in person, because there's a lot of different things that you can read body language wise and things that even though you're on Zoom, you say, well, I can still see their face. Yeah, maybe in a little corner or a little box or something. So where we have, I think, done a good job and developed a lot of new ways to be able to do things, I don't believe that they're close to being as good as what you need to do, whether it's building a relationship or teaching from an in-person.
Not necessarily for this Cincinnati team specifically, but for any football team anywhere. Do you think there's like one thing that's the most important that any team gets out of spring ball, like the one thing that's most important about spring ball from start to finish?
I think it's a development of fundamentals for us. Is it really a schematic thing? Are you really scheming up going against your offense and your defense? No. And I think you can sometimes get a little too competitive. I know that's kind of an oxymoron in this program, but you can get a little bit too competitive to think we've got to scheme up against each other when it really comes down to when after 15 practices, do they understand what they're doing and why they're doing it better, and can they do the little program principles and fundamentals a hell of a lot better than they could 15 practices or 34 days beforehand. With that being said, then you kind of just get the familiarity to guys being able to play together. You know, there's nothing greater than 5 offensive linemen finding a way to be able to communicate, sometimes just through hand signals, just through looks. You can't do that in a meeting room. You can't do that in walkthroughs. So I think, you know, there's twofold a little bit there. Certain positions can grow a lot, you know, throughout spring ball, on top of the fundamentals and the what's and the whys to what you're doing, you know, offensively, defensively, and special teams wise.
Coach, I think you only got 4 of these practices last year. Did you notice any of those fundamentals either lacking or different because of that, or is there anything you learned from that you're going to try and use this year?
I did, you know, and I think that's where, you know, camp was different for us. I think even the pre-camp was a little bit different. We just kind of wanted to go back and focus in. You know, the things I worry about and the guys I worry about the most are the younger guys, because, you know, some of the things that you would have done, whether it was in spring ball or even in camp, that you might not have got to do, you had to focus a little bit more, especially when we came back, on the older guys, and the development of those young guys sometimes, you know, diminished, just like a bowl game. You know, we had a bowl practice this year, but it wasn't, you know, you had 12 days. It wasn't like you got the normal, you know, 10, 12 practices where you really focused on young guys' development fundamentally and understand the what's and the whys. That I don't know if you noticed it or we even noticed it to date. It's going to be now as we come back and through the fall of next year and the following year to see what some of these guys, you know, maybe missed or lacked from that time.
Coach, what's the challenge of working with the defensive line room and the defensive back room with so many guys that are chomping at the bit to get on the field? And when you look at Jawan Briggs, do you think it's like looking at yourself in a mirror when you were playing defensive line?
No, on the Jawan Briggs, if you can't tell. No, so no. The closest thing we are is a skin tone. I don't think anything other than that. Size and speed there's nothing similar. But working with guys, I think that, you know, the difficult thing when you've got some depth, especially in today's age, is really making sure, whether it's a relationship or building the trust with some of those other guys that might not be getting as many reps or don't see maybe a light at the end of the tunnel. You know, everybody wants to play now, and you wouldn't be a competitor and you wouldn't be as good as you are if you didn't. But to be playing maybe behind Ahmad or Kobe, who comes back for another year, it does make it difficult on young guys. And, you know, as much as they want to play and as hard as they've worked, their opportunities might not be as many. And not saying they can't beat them out, not saying they can't take the spot, but I think you really got to be careful to making sure that you're building and developing those guys on the football field, but also in a relationship, because, you know, when things like that hit, there are too many options nowadays for guys when things aren't going exactly the way they want to. When in reality, you know, those are the times you really got to be able to fight through, and those are the times we got to do a better job in as coaches to make sure, you know, we understand what's going through these guys' minds and heads, and you know, respect them, because, you know, we brought them here to play ball. You know, we wouldn't love them if they didn't have that burning desire to be on the football field, probably. But then when the opportunities aren't there, we also got to make sure that, you know, we've got a relationship enough with them that they can understand that they are getting better and their opportunities are going to be real soon.
Coach, speaking of that, I know it's a different program, but there's a real camaraderie and brotherhood amongst the different, you know, football, basketball guys, especially work out together. What's your sense of the solidarity of, you know, with all the guys in the basketball program that a lot of your guys are really close to, having entered the transfer portal, and how it might affect just the overall mood there?
It's hard, you know, because whether it's our guys know them well, I mean, you know, you start to build a relationship and you lose guys. It's, you know, it's not easy. You know, if it happens, you know, to the basketball team, it does affect us. If it happens to us, it affects, I'm sure, some of those guys. I'd say the toughest thing this year and in this past year is, you know, even if like me, I don't know a lot of those guys. I used to, not saying I had a great relationship with those guys, but I would see them all the time in the training room, you know, mess around, talk with them, different things here and there. And with the way the year has been and the things we've had to do, I think some of those connections, you don't have. And I don't think it's a good thing. Like I've said, I think to be able to be in person, to build some of those relationships, is the way I like to do things. So in some ways, we're not or haven't been in this past year connected to, whether it's the guys from the basketball team, the girls from the basketball team, the volleyball team, where I think one of the unique things about being at UC and being in the Linder and having everybody together, it creates what I would say is an Olympic Village type of atmosphere that really helps you get through a lot of those things. It's not just football or basketball. It's not just the 7 or 8 guys that you play with or the guys that are in your meeting room. When you can have some other relationships and friendships outside of it, I think it's a lot better environment. And I think that we've all kind of struggled from not having that. Everybody at times needs somebody that's not in their little circle, even for us as coaches. To have Coach Guggens' office right next to me, I unfortunately hadn't got a chance to see him for 4 or 5 months. And, it's not going to change. No, I know, but it's really nice to sit down for a few minutes and have a cup of coffee or talk with somebody that's, that doesn't have to go through all the different things that you're going through at that time. It just has a different perspective on things. And I think it's been tough on us as coaches, and I think it's been a lot harder on these 18 to 22-year-olds. And, I think that's, piles on to, whether the issues that, the guys leaving in the basketball program or even the guys that are leaving in the football program. It's made it a lot more difficult.
I know thanks. I know we're 5-6 months away, but I know fans get excited about the schedule. But do you look at that and see, especially the non-conference, the opportunities you get? Do you get excited about getting to play at Indiana, Notre Dame, having those chances?
Oh yeah, there's no doubt. I mean, you can't. It's like you said. There are certain things you got to be able to focus on. There's certain things you got to be able to block out. Those are great things. When you're talking to people out and about, whether it's a community or not. Of course, those are the things they want to talk about. Of course, our kids, have those things circled and the ability to be able to, to play in those venues. But then you got to have the maturity enough to be able to say, okay, it's 5-6 months away, and what do we got to do to make sure we're in a position that when we get there, we have the opportunities that we need to have. So I think it's twofold, but I think there's nothing better that to have that within your community is to have that little buzz as well. That's why maybe in some ways our guys happen to still be, living a little bit different and inside a, so to speak, smaller bubble. Maybe it's going to help us in the long run because they can stay a little more focused than what's with everything that's going on and what we have lined up for this coming year.
Did you fill out a bracket for March Madness?
Yeah, the wrestling brackets I fill out every year. You talking about the three most difficult days in sports? You don't even know what that is, right? The 3 most difficult days in sports is Thursday, Friday, Saturday of the college NCAA wrestling tournament. I filled out every year. We look at the brackets and make our picks, but in my 40-some years of existence, I've never filled out an NCAA March Madness basketball bracket. So, and that's not because it's an NCAA rule. That's not. I wouldn't do it because it's an NCAA rule. But I've never filled out a basketball bracket. But I have the 3 most difficult days in sport NCAA wrestling brackets all the time.
Who did you have winning the rest?
I think it was I thought it was a slam dunk going into the year that Iowa was going to win it, but I didn't know how close that anybody else could come to them. So it was at least entertaining and exciting.